Okay, so now we switch back to English, and I'll tell you about the Astrocamp. So the idea in principle is quite simple. It's a 2-week academic program for high school students, so students in the last 3 years of pre-university education, which is organized by us, the CAUP training unit, with the collaboration and support of a number of national and international partners, to which I'll come back a little bit later. So this project started in 2012, so this will be the 6th year. In the first 4 editions, the project was only aimed at Portuguese students. Last year, we started accepting applications from students anywhere in the European Union, and this year the system will be the same, so we'll accept applications from anywhere in the European Union. So the camp lasts 2 weeks. The dates this year are here, August 6 to 20. It takes place at the Corno do Bico Protected Landscape Area, about 100 kilometers north of here. So what are we trying to do with this? We're trying to identify young students who have the talent and the motivation to be future leaders in the area of work that they choose, whether that is astrophysics or any other is immaterial to some extent, and give them additional tools and additional encouragement to proceed along that path by providing them high-quality training in a quiet environment where they can fully exploit their capabilities, by stimulating the development of other transversal skills, curiosity, critical thinking, teamwork, group responsibility. Science these days is not done alone, it's done in big collaborations, so it's something that people need to learn. And on top of that, we want to put these people in contact with one another. So it's quite a good experience for people to get to know others who come from very different places, have different life experiences, have different views of the world even, but have common goals and common thoughts about the future and common plans. So it's always good for people to interact and discuss ideas at that level. So that's the idea. How do we do it in practice? Well, the camp is selective, which means that if you want to participate, you'll need to apply. You'll need to go through a selection process. The first stage of which is the submission of an application. The second stage of which, if you get there, is an interview, which is done in English. So even in the first few years where we only had Portuguese students, the interviews are always done in English. Part of our goals is to get students used to English as a scientific language. And of course, these days, most of science and most of other things in the world are done in English, so we will need to be fluent in English. But at least for Portuguese students, if you are accepted, the camp is completely free. You have no expenses. For students in other countries, that may or may not be the case. We have some funds for foreign students that I'll discuss a little bit later. So we can and are actively trying to find funds for foreign students. Students, if they get offered a place, may try to find it by themselves by contacting local authorities, local funding bodies. If everything else fails, then foreign students may need to pay part of their expenses, or they may need to ask their parents to pay part of their expenses. So I'll come back to that point a little bit later. The camp has a wide range of activities, from scientific to recreational ones. Students will have to take 2 courses, each of which will have 10 classes of 1.5 hours each, plus a final exam, a written exam at the end. There'll be observational and computational projects, so we'll learn scientific programming, statistical methods for data analysis, a bunch of other things. We'll have stargazing sessions, both with telescopes and with naked eye, so we'll learn to identify the constellations of the night sky. I think you should not really call yourself an astronomer or an astrophysicist if you cannot identify constellations of the night sky. We'll watch documentaries and other geeky things. We'll have some community service activities. There's also a cycle of public talks that are designed and sort of thought for the students, so aimed at the students, but that are open to the general public, so other people can come along. So these talks are in the evening. and they're the only part of the camp that is open to the public. Beyond that, we have other recreational activities, lots of hiking, traditional games, several other things. But we also have post-camp activities. So we want these to be the beginning of a journey, if you're so inclined. So we spend a lot of effort designing and contributing to post-camp activities, including projects, so we can supervise you in research projects that you can try and do, and you'll see 2 examples of that after the break. We can support you if you apply for other activities by providing recommendation letters, because we've seen you at the camp, we know you well, so we can provide good recommendation letters for other things. So we try to follow you and to encourage you and to stimulate your curiosity even beyond the camp. So speaking of community service, let me mention one thing that we did in previous years and that I'm quite proud of, and a lot of people here should also be quite proud of, which is the solar system trail. So if you want to build a scale model of the solar system, it's easy to do it accurately in terms of sizes of the objects, or to do it accurately in terms of distances of the objects. It's a lot harder to do it accurate in both aspects. So it's a lot harder to build a model that's simultaneously accurate in terms of relative sizes and relative distances. So as far as I know, I've been doing some research on this, and it's not always easy to find information, but throughout Europe, there's about 10 or 12 of these. We built one of them. So it's here. So these are 2 pictures. So initially, you cannot see the picture really well, but we did it by hand. So this was literally handmade. So there's some small wooden boards that the students build themselves and put in the appropriate places. So after 4 years, we talked to the Paredes municipality and a bunch of other people, got some additional funding, and now there's a hiking trail that follows the paths of the planet. There's a big information sign, so you can now go there and walk from the sun to Neptune in an hour and a half if you're fit, because you have to go uphill. If you're a bit lazy or not fit, you may need, or just want to watch the landscape, which is really nice, it might take you about 2 hours or something like that. So we can now go there, and so there's also a website, which at the moment only exists in Portuguese. One of the things on my list is to get an English version of this site. But this is something that we built, so the students in previous years built, and it's there. Now everyone can enjoy it. Okay, so with that, Nuria will tell you a little bit about what she thought of last year's edition, and then I'll come back to tell you how you can apply to this year's edition.
So, good afternoon, I'm Nuria. I'm from Almeida Garrett High School in Gaia, and I'm going to talk about my experience at Astrocamp 2016. When I applied for this program, I wasn't sure if I would be selected because it was the first year that Astrocamp was also including foreign teenagers. So the first thing that I wanted to tell you is that you shouldn't be afraid of applying because you don't have anything to lose. So in the official website, the instructions about how to apply, the things that you will need to take with you to the camp, and the practical information are really explicit. So I think you won't have any doubts about that. When you apply and if you overcome the selection, you will have to be interviewed, and you are interviewed via Skype or here in Kaup if you live relatively close. When I went to the interview, I was a little bit nervous because the typical thoughts that we have started to come, like, oh, and if I don't know how to answer to that question or to the next one. But the thing that is important is that you shouldn't be afraid of that, because the questions they ask you are essentially based on simple examples, and you just have to try to figure out a possible solution that would eventually solve the problem. So on the first day, our meeting point was on the train station in Vienna, and there it was the first time that I met the other Astrocampers. So of the 15 students, 9 were Portuguese, 3 were Spanish, 1 was Polish, 1 French, and 1 British. They were really awesome, and I learned many things with them. Also, in the first day, when we arrived at SEIA, we grabbed our things and we organized them in our rooms. But due to the high temperatures last year, forest fires start really close to our dorms. So we had to grab our things again and move down to the city center. I really admired the sense of responsibility and tranquility that all the monitors had. They were really responsible and aware of the situation, and they proceeded very consciously during the occurrence. Then we had fun, we felt safe, and I think one of the strongest points, at least in the last edition, was that kind of sense of responsibility and security that all the monitors transmit to us, and I think that was important. So about the lectures, we had the lectures in that building that was really next to our dorms. We had like 2 main courses. One was more theoretical and the other was more practical, and it made a total of 20 lessons. We discussed about the Big Bang, the expansion of the universe, dark matter, dark energy, the origin and development of galaxies and stars and planets, and really many things. I think the lessons were really interesting, and besides our lectures, we had many activities such as cooking. We went to the Lego Center, we played traditional games, we did Skype and documentary sessions, we did geocaching, we went to the river, we went to the Apresentação Center, and we have like a wide experience. We did many kinds of activities. Another important event that we had was the Solar System Trail. This trail consists it's like a 8.6 kilometer trail, and we did like, if I'm not mistaken, we took like about 2 hours because we were also seeing the landscapes of the protected area of Corumbico. And it was really good because we could relax from the other activities and appreciate the landscapes. We also did space observations at night. We studied the galaxies, stars and planets and how to find them in the sky, as well as the constellations. I think Astrocamp was an amazing experience because one important aspect that I think it gave like some kind of good environment was the fact that we couldn't have our phones with us because in that way we had the opportunity to talk more with each other and to be more united and appreciate the little things that were surrounding us. Also about the Astrocamp, I met really nice people. They were really, really awesome. I also learned not only about astrophysics, but also about other languages, traditions, and cultures, and I think that was really interesting. And I believe this program offers an opportunity for you to broaden your horizons, and I believe and I strongly recommend you to apply for this program. So if you have any doubts, I can answer that. Okay.
Any questions for Nuria? Now you'll have a chance to ask her while we have the cookies. Okay, so no, whoops. Okay. So now I'll explain how to apply to this edition. The system is more or less the same as in previous years. We introduce slight changes, but the overall methodology is the same. So the dates are already, well, I already mentioned them, August 6 to 20. We're planning to have between 10 and 20 students. That essentially depends on funding. Because, as I said, it's a point of principle that Portuguese students do not pay, so we are limited by the amount of funding we get. We'll have between 2 and 4 teachers and 4 and 6 monitors. These numbers, of course, correlate with the numbers of students. The idea is that the teachers are people who have doctorates in physics or astronomy or related areas and are active researchers at the moment, so people who are currently doing research. The monitors are university students, undergraduate or master students, and in most cases, maybe all cases, they'll be former Astrocamp students. So people who have been there, they know the place, they know how things work, they know the difficulties that students might have, and so on. And I think this is actually one of the great things about the program, that there's a continuity of people that have, there's a few people that have been there both as students and as monitors. As I said, we have a number of national and international partners. So the camp is organized by us and by SEIA, so the people who run the protected landscape area. In terms of Portuguese funding, we have funds from, so our own internal funds, from funds of the CAUP training unit. We have funds from Ciência Viva, from the Millennium BCP Foundation, from the University of Porto Rector's Office. We also have support from Gradiva. We have a small library of books from Gradiva that students can use during the camp. In terms of international partners, we're very happy to announce that ESO has become an international partner. An announcement has been published a few days ago. So ESO will provide funds for one student from an ESO member country. So EU countries are not necessarily ESO member countries and vice versa. So you need to be a European Union student to apply, and if you are in an ESO member country, then you may get this bursary that will cover your expenses. In addition, we have another international partner, which is the Fundació Catalunya La Pedrera, which is a Catalan foundation. And here, so this is a foundation with which we have been collaborating for many years. And here the agreement is that so they have their own program called Jovens e Ciência, and for students who are part of this program, if they apply and are selected, then the program will cover their expenses. So there's no fixed commitment in the sense that their students may or may not apply and may or may not be selected, but if they apply and are selected, then the program will cover their expenses. We are constantly trying to find additional sources of funding from other countries, and maybe we'll have additional sources, so additional funds coming up in the next few months. So keep an eye on the website for this. On the other hand, ESO has also agreed to help us find additional funds for foreign students. What I mean is that if we make an offer to a foreign student, then ESO, of course, has lots of contacts in each different country, so they may tell the student or suggest the student, why don't you contact this foundation or this institution and ask them for funds. So there'll be a sort of networking point to help us and the students to find funds. One other thing that we already did last year, and I think worked quite well, and I will try to do it again this year, is that the students will contribute to designing the contents of the courses. So of course, there's an issue of human resources. Teachers have to be available to be there the 2 weeks. But with those caveats, what we've done is there's an international call for proposals. So researchers can propose to teach courses at the camp. So I received these proposals. So I look at them. We check that they make scientific and pedagogical sense. And then at the time of the interviews, students will receive a list of possible courses, possible things they want to learn about, and they'll give us some feedback. And they say, I prefer to have this rather than that, or things like that. And then taking that feedback into account, we'll go back, negotiate with the teachers, and try to come up with the specific content for your classes. So, of course, these things need to make pedagogical sense. If you want to learn about black holes, you need to learn a few other things before that, for example. But bearing that in mind, students will be involved in choosing and in designing the contents of the course. This is also an advantage of the interviews, because we interview you, we know what your level of knowledge is, and we know how far we can push you, so we can design a course that's adequate for you. That maybe it will be challenging for you, but of course, so with material that you are capable of learning, given what we know about you. Also, as in previous years, there's an alumni weekend. So in the weekend, in the middle of the 2 weeks, so the camp starts on a Sunday and ends on a Sunday. In the weekend in the middle, students from former editions can come back to the camp, so meet the new generation and participate in the activities we'll have in the weekend. So last year, this is when we had the official opening of the Solar System Trail. This year, hopefully, we'll start a new project, which I cannot talk about right now. It will be confidential for a couple more months, but we're trying to start an exciting new project during the weekend, and former students can contribute to this. So, in terms of bureaucracy and sort of what you have to do in detail, all these things are already on the website, and there, in particular, there's a PDF file with camp regulations, but I know that not everyone reads camp regulations in detail, so I'll go through them. So the applications are done online on the website. So the website is here. It will appear again in 1 or 2 slides. The applications period will be during the month of April. So April 1st to 30th. As I said, students from any European Union country who are currently in the last 3 years of pre-university education can apply. So in Portugal, this is secondary school, 10th to 12th grade. In other countries, names will vary, but it's last 3 years before you go to university. So anyone can apply, except if you participated already. Right? You can only participate once as a student. You can come to the alumni weekend, and later on you can be a monitor and so on, but as a student, you can only participate once. This is, of course, to give opportunities to as large a number of students as possible. So in principle, this will be people born between 1999 and 2001. There's always 1 or 2 exceptions, people who start school 1 year early and so on. And there's one place reserved for a student from Paredes Dakota Secondary High School. Everyone else is selected through this application process, and the application process is common to all the students, whether they're Portuguese or not. So essentially the only criterion is academic merit and potential. So there's no quotas for Portuguese or foreign students. There's no quotas for boys and girls. There's no quotas for 10th, 11th, or 12th grade. Merit is the only criterion. And as I said, and Nuri also mentioned this, the second stage of the selection process is an interview, which is done in English for everyone. And that interview can be done in person here at CAUP on May 27, which is a Saturday, in Lisbon at the Pavilion of Knowledge, May 28, or via Skype. So for people in continental Portugal, if they are invited for an interview, the invitation will suggest that you'll come to Porto or Lisbon, but you can always say, no, that's too far for me. Could I be interviewed by Skype? And the answer will always be yes. Of course, foreign students or students from Azores or Madeira will be interviewed by Skype. So there's no problem with that. So there's There's ways to ensure that the process is not biased and that people who are interviewed in person are not favored with respect to those being interviewed by Skype. So there's we make a lot of effort to ensure that there's no bias there and that the process is fair. So you're free to decide, if you're in continental Portugal, whether you want to come in person or be interviewed by Skype. That said, though, bear in mind that an interview by Skype is always a little bit more stressful for the person being interviewed, right? Because your internet can break down, or because there might be a problem with the microphone or whatever. Okay, so what do you need to apply? So on the website, in the application form, in addition to various bits of data, your name, your date of birth, a bunch of other things, you'll need to provide, so to upload files containing, first, a motivation letter written by you in English, so explaining who you are, why do you want to apply, what you hope to get out of the camp, and so on. A letter of recommendation written by a current teacher, and that can be written in Portuguese or in English. Ideally, from a teacher in a scientific area, from physics, maths, whatever, but if in some cases, maybe the school director prefers to do that. In some countries, this is a tradition, and if that's the case, that's fine, as long as it's explained. Because in principle, the requirement is that it's a current teacher, so someone who is teaching you right now, so he or she knows you. Then you'll need a school certificate with your latest grades. So in Portugal, that's the second term grades, so the grades you get just before the Easter holidays. In other countries, you may get grade certificates in maybe twice a year rather than 3 times a year. Again, if you're in doubt, ask us exactly what we mean. Optionally, so there'll be an additional box for additional optional documents, things like certificates of participation in other scientific activities like physics Olympiads, astronomy Olympiads, these kinds of things. Certificates of proficiency of English, for example, if you have them, and any other document that you think is helpful in supporting your application or helping us to get to know you. But all this is optional. And if you're less than 18 at the moment of application, you need a signed authorization of your parents and or legal guardians authorizing you to apply. So notice that I said when applying. So to give an example, if your 18th birthday is on the 1st of May, if you're selected when you'll be at the camp, you'll be 18, so you can decide things for yourself. But at the moment of applying, you're still 17, so you still need an authorization. Without that, your application is not legally valid, or legally we're not allowed to look at it without your parents' authorization. So all these things you upload onto the website with one exception, and the exception is the recommendation letter from the teacher. So in that case, what happens is that on the form, you provide the name and the email contact of the teacher, and at the moment where you submit the application, the database sends an automatic email to the teacher saying, this student has nominated you as someone providing a letter, and the email will contain some instructions on how the teacher should send the letter. Right? So obviously, you should contact the teacher beforehand, warn him or her to expect an email asking for this. Okay, so assuming you go through the application process and are offered a place, so you'll receive these offers by email in the beginning of June, so in the 1st, 2nd of June, and you must confirm your participation by June 14. And here, by confirmation, I don't mean just replying to the email and saying, yes, I'll come. There'll be some additional paperwork that you'll need to fill. You'll need to sign a sort of contract saying you agree to participate and are aware of the rules. You need to nominate a contact point outside, so in case you become ill at the camp, who do we contact, and things like that. That person will have the monitor's contact, so he or she can get in touch with us for any reason. So all this has to be organized in writings, and all this paperwork needs to be finished by June 14th. Now, I know that, at least in Portugal, this is a time of the year where students may be busy with exams and things like that. But nevertheless, I have to emphasize that we need to strictly follow this deadline because there's also paperwork on our side, right? We need to include you in the camp insurance policy. There's a bunch of things that we need to do and also take time. And so if we receive no confirmation from you at this time, we may just cancel your offer and offer the place to another student that will be on the waiting list. Obviously, students that have any physical limitation, any dietary requirements, things like allergies, asthma, things like that, we need to know about this as soon as possible. If you're a vegetarian, for example, the people that say you prepare the meals need to prepare a specific food plan for you. So all these things can be done but take time. So it's the students' and parents' responsibility to inform us of any such issues. And as far as is possible and as far as the facilities that permit, we'll do our best to accommodate them. So the camp is residential. This means that all the students, monitors, and teachers stay at the camp the whole time, the whole 2 weeks. Right? It's not possible at all for you to arrive a day late or to leave 1 day early, so everyone has to be there the whole time. So this is done for pedagogical reasons, of course, but also for logistics reasons. So specifically what I mean by that is that there's a meeting point, which like last year is the train and bus station in the town of Viana, a bit north of here. The two stations are just side by side. So everyone has to arrive there before 4 p.m. on August the 6th. And you'll be returned to the meeting point before 12 noon on August 20. So for students in continental Portugal, it's easy. You can come by train or bus, or if you prefer, your parents can drive you there. For students that have to fly into Porto Airport, someone from the organization, maybe one of the teachers, maybe one of the monitors, will be waiting for you at Porto Airport and then do the rest of the journey with you. So you just tell us when you arrive, what is your flight number, and so on, and we'll take care of that. So all this travel within Portugal, so between your home and the meeting point, if you are in mainland Portugal, or between Porto Airport and the meeting point, is covered by us, or it's refunded if you buy the tickets, provided you do it by public transport. So if you travel by bus or train, you get the tickets in Cope's name, and then we refund you the money. If you prefer to get to Viana by car, or if your parents just prefer to drive you rather than having you on the train and bus, then that's fine, that's your option, but we cannot refund expenses with private cars. For students coming from Azores or Madeira, we'll help, essentially they can apply to the regional governments for refunds of their flights, and we'll support that application, although we cannot guarantee that the flights will be covered because it's not our money, it doesn't depend on us. For foreign students, if they have funding, the flights may or may not be covered. So Fundação Catalunha La Pedreira, in the grants they give to students, I think, include the flights, but the ESO doesn't. So in the ESO bursary, they'll get the expenses in the camp itself, but not the flights. So in these cases, the students either have a grant that covers the flights, or the parents have to cover the flights. As I said, we'll have some funds for foreign students. We'll certainly have the ESO grant that will go to one foreign student. We'll help others find sources of money, so we can provide a letter saying this student has been offered a place at the camp, and so on, so they can use the letter to apply to local sources of funding. The expenses that we expect each student should pay, if they have to pay their own expenses, will be around 400 euro. Right, so these are the costs of keeping one student at the camp for the 2 weeks, and as I said, if everything else fails, then the student or the parents will have to pay this, and this should be paid by the end of June. So some dates to keep in mind. The applications are in the month of April, as I said. Immediately after the applications close, we'll look through them, so do a first stage of selection. We'll invite people for interviews by email, and these invitations should be sent within 1 week or so. I cannot exactly commit to a date because I don't know how many applications we'll have and so on, but by the 10th of May, you should have received an invitation if you've passed to the second stage. Or in other words, if you receive no news by the 10th of May, you should assume that your application was not successful. Then in the last weekend of May, 27 and 28, we'll have the interviews. So on Saturday, the 27th, here at CAUP, on Sunday, 28th, at Pavilion of Knowledge in Lisbon, or via Skype on either day. So essentially, we'll have the interviews in person in the middle of the day, and the interviews by Skype will typically be early in the morning or late in the afternoon. So when you receive an invitation, the invitation will suggest an exact day and time. If you cannot make that day or time, you should reply immediately and say, that time is not good for me, I'm only available this day from this time to that time. And we'll try to swap things around and make a schedule that fits everyone. But bear in mind that the interviews have to be done during this weekend, right? I don't mind interviewing people at 7 a.m. or at 11 p.m., and I've done some of these interviews. Well, I haven't done 7 a.m., but I've done 10:30 p.m. for sure. So I'm quite flexible in shifting these things around, at least for Skype interviews. Of course, I'm not going to come to the building at 7 a.m. That should be clear. So we can be flexible, but bear in mind that the interviews have to be done this weekend. Of course, for reasons of fairness, we cannot interview people over an extended period. We have to do them together. So when we make the selection, we have everyone's interviews in mind and try and be as fair as possible. So we have to fit them there. Then, as I said, in the beginning of June, you should get offers of places. At this point, if you don't get an offer, this means you're on the waiting list. Right? It has happened in the past that some people have been offered places, but then they realize they cannot go because their parents want to go on holidays at that period or for some other reason. And they decline the offer, and then we suddenly have an extra place and we make another offer. So if you don't receive an offer immediately, it means your chances of being accepted are lower, certainly, but not necessarily zero. Right? So essentially, we'll only contact you once you know what the final outcome is, either because you have a place or because all the places have been filled and we could not offer you one. And so if there are any payments to be made by the students, so ESO will transfer the money directly to us. So if you get the ESO grant, you don't need to worry about anything. We'll take care of it. So if there's any payments to be done, we should receive them by the end of June. And the camp is in August. Again, here's the website. So just to finish, the Astrocamp is your chance to learn about your favorite physics and astronomy topics, to use data from the world's best telescopes, to learn skills that will be essential for any career, not just in physics or astrophysics, but in a very wide range of areas, scientific programming, data analysis, these kinds of things. It's also your chance to talk to active scientists, both at the camp and elsewhere. So as Nuria mentioned, we have conversations by Skype with astronomers and physicists working in other places. And it's also, of course, your chance to meet other students from different places which have similar interests as you. On the other hand, the Astrocamp is not a 2-week holiday in the mountains. That should be clear by now. It's an academic program. You'll work hard, but we try to give you conditions where you can push yourself to your limits, right? Where you can work and exploit the maximum of your capabilities and even develop additional capabilities. So we just try to provide the settings for you to do that. It's not just for future astrophysicists. We've had people in the camp who had no intention of studying physics or astronomy. They had decided they wanted to do other things, but they simply wanted to learn more about astronomy and physics and to learn it properly, and that's, of course, a perfectly good reason to apply. So I'd say it's essentially a way to learn how science is actually done. And the skills you'll get are not just specific to astronomy or physics. They are skills you'll be able to use in other contexts. It's also not necessarily for the students with best grades. Grades measure some things, but they're not necessarily the best way of predicting future outcomes or future performance. So don't be intimidated because the person or your classmates are applying and they have slightly better grades than you. Nevertheless, keep in mind that it is a selective program, so you should invest some time and effort in preparing a good application, writing a good motivation letter, and things like that. So don't leave the application for the last minute. That might not be a good idea. And so it's a selective program, and it will challenge you every day. You will work hard at the camp, so you'll learn things. You'll learn a lot of things a lot faster than you normally do in high school. So you'll have to be prepared to work. And with that, I'll conclude. Let me just say that even if you are completely convinced that you're going to apply, you should still go to the website and read the camp regulations. They are there already. They've been there since November. So read them in detail. Make sure you understood what's there. Make sure you know what you need to do. And if something is not clear, then just contact us. There's a dedicated email, which is this one, so you can contact us at any time. So the email will be checked regularly, and we'll provide answers as soon as we can. If you're not sure whether or not this is for you, as Nuria also said, apply anyway and you can decide later, right? If you don't get in, the problem has been solved for you. If you're offered a place, then you can think about whether or not you want to take it, right? And that's it. So if you apply, good luck. I hope to see a lot of you at the interviews, or at least see your applications, and we'll see what happens after that. Okay, so with that I'll finish. I don't know if there's any questions. Yes?
You mentioned as you give access to the last 3 years of school. Is there any preference to any of those year groups, or is there any accommodation made for the different capabilities of the different year groups?
Right, so in terms of preference, no. I can tell you just off the top of my head that of the students we had in the camp up to now, roughly 40% were in 11th grade, 30 in 10th grade, and 30 in 12th grade, roughly speaking. In terms of capabilities, certainly a student in 10th grade will know a bit less than a student in 12th grade. However, the things they'll learn are new for them in any case. So essentially, as long as a 10th grade student can learn fast enough, he can catch up, right? Because what they'll learn is something that they will not know, but the 12th grade student will not know either.
They take the same exam at the end of the exam?
Yes. So the exam is the same. There are things, for example, 12th grade students typically know how to calculate derivatives. Just to give a specific example, 10th grade students don't. But we can always sit with them for an hour or two, explain them what derivatives are, and at least explain them what they need to continue with what they have to do, and that's usually not a problem. So our experience is that this is not a problem. Essentially, I could say this the other way. If a 10th grade student is there, it's because we're pretty sure that he can cope with what we have to offer, right? If you're unsure about it, you'll probably not be accepted, and maybe you'll apply next year and come. There's been a few cases already of students that were accepted the second year they applied. So this is something that can happen. But in principle, there's no preference for old versus young students. It's just on merit. But we are aware, as I said already, one advantage of the interviews is that we know what the students know. So we can prepare the classes having that in mind. Okay, more questions? I don't know if I can tell you the numbers because they're underage people and so on. But I can tell you in the first 4 years, making the shortlist for the interviews I found easy. Selecting the students for the camp was already hard because there's one or two students that are very obvious they have a place, but then the differences are really, really small. Last year, it was the first time that I also found it difficult to make a shortlist for the interviews because the competition was already big enough that sometimes I was thinking, okay, I'm interviewing these people, but do I add 2 more? Or so where to draw the line? That became difficult. So the competition is tough. But again, if you don't apply, you won't get in. Okay, more questions?